Hello again, everybody. This is Craig Evans of Autism Hangout, and thank you for tuning into this episode of Ask Dr. Tony, where Dr. Tony Attwood answers your questions about autism and Asperger's. Hi, Dr. Tony. How you been?
Hi, Craig. I'm fine. Looking forward to some very interesting questions and trying to be able to provide some support for the people raising those questions.
Questions as to how we can live best with Asperger's and autism. So here we go. Let's start with personal management issues. Hi, my name is Rex, and I'm 11. I live in Washington, and I have a problem blurting out in my classroom a lot, even when my teacher is talking. I know it's weird, but I don't know how to stop it. Do you have any advice?
Okay, first of all, some moral support for you. This is not your choice. This is something that is very difficult for you to inhibit because you do it without thinking. It just happens. So whatever consequences, good or bad, is unlikely to inhibit what you're doing. Now, first of all, I think with the teacher and the other kids in the class, to be able to explain to them that this is a problem you face. You don't have to use the A word or anything like that. Just say, I've got a problem saying the first thought that comes into my head, and I just say it. I'm trying to stop it, but I hope you may not be annoyed because I'm not doing it to upset you. Mm-hmm. So he needs to be able to explain that for other people's, I suppose, reassurance that he's not being naughty or bad. However, I think that medication could help. It's almost like an ADHD, impulsive reaction. So I think talk to a physician and perhaps do a trial of the medication designed to treat ADHD to see if it can inhibit what you're doing. Most of the medication lasts only for 3 or 4 hours. It works within the first 10, 15 minutes. So just have enough supply for about 3 days at school and see if it makes any difference. If it does, great. If not, I think the main approach is to apologize afterwards.
Self-advocacy. Also under personal management. This is about binge eating. Food, and more food. My 29-year-old son cannot stop eating. He's extremely overweight with negative health effects that are already evident, but he always needs to feel really full and is fearful of not being full. He bolts food down, barely chewing. Can you help?
Okay, this is a complex one, and there are many dimensions that could be occurring here. As I've not seen your son, these are the areas that I would explore. First of all, he may be eating as a source of comfort, and he may be a person who has very few pleasures or comforts in his life, and the taste and enjoyment of food is one of them. So it's a source of pleasure. But there can be an autistic factor. And we're finding with research and clinical experience that those with autism may not recognize mentally the internal stop signals or hunger signals. So in other words, his brain may not pick up the signals of satiation, you're full, and he keeps going, as much as some will have the opposite and have no signals of hunger and just seem to get going. Now, obviously, we would look at small portions for him, otherwise he may have a compulsion to clear whatever is on his plate. So small portions and a program of limited food and the types of food. But I think he really does need to talk to a dietitian about what's going on. But there is a potential autistic dimension of not picking up the internal signals. So it needs to be visually in front of him. When you finish that small plate, that's it, no more.
Also under personal management issues, this is about Asperger's and chronic fatigue. I'm a 44-year-old woman that is diagnosed with Asperger's at the age of 42. I was wondering if there's any relationship between Asperger's and chronic fatigue. It's been an increasing issue with age, and I had to stop working my part-time job 4 years ago. Sensory and social situations make me exhausted for a long time afterwards, and I get headaches and migraines frequently. These situations can also make me feel like my brain is on fire, kind of like a hard drive for a computer that is overloaded. I have a feeling that I have reached this point by trying to fit in and manage everything that everybody else does with very limited success. Eventually, my body said, stop, and I have a very limited capacity now. Can there be a correlation between this and my Asperger's?
Very simply, yes, absolutely. It can be the exhaustion of just coping with life, because it's coping with dimensions other people don't have to work on. Now, that's the social side, reading body language, analyzing social performance, coping with sensory sensitivity and anxiety in particular. Neurotypicals often are not aware of how exhausting daily life is. Now, with my friend and colleague, Maya Tode from Denmark, in the book Exploring Depression, we've got a section on energy accounting. Maya has autism, and it's a way of finding out what events in the day deplete your energy bank account and what events restore it. The chances are that you have far more experiences that drain you of energy than give you energy. This provides you with a clear plan of ensuring that you reduce energy depleting activities, but also have more energizing activities. However, I think what you found is your limit. Please pull back, because if you carry on, you're going to get seriously ill, physically or mentally. This is your body saying enough is enough. You may have an ability to camouflage and a determination to prove to yourself you're successful, but there's a limit. So please, your body is giving you clear signals. Back off in whatever you think is necessary. It may be in terms of hours of work, it could be social commitments, all those sorts of things, but don't. It's a very serious situation.
Mm-hmm. Next is medical cannabis. It relates to anxiety. My 29-year-old daughter with ASD is looking into medical cannabis to help her with her anxiety and her depression. I was at a conference that was led by you in 2011, and you said, stay away from marijuana, it hurts the gray matter. Is there any new information you can give me?
Yes, I'll clarify that. Stay away from illegal marijuana, I suppose, in a way. It's just that it is a very complex molecule that has many components that are quite toxic in many ways. One of the things that marijuana does is it affects the frontal lobes and slows down and changes thinking. Now, if you've got racing, anxious thoughts, it's one of the best ways of slowing them down and making them more manageable. But the problem is the amount, because if it goes too far, it's almost switching off the frontal lobes. Now, those with autism definitely need their frontal lobes. They're planning, they're organizing, they're remembering what to do, organizing their day and abilities. So in autism, you need a highly functioning frontal lobe. Now, the thing is, the new medicinal cannabis has been refined to get rid of the toxic components. So I'm going to qualify that and say, I think medicinal cannabis is worth a try because it could have a very significant effect on that anxiety which races out of control. If you can stop that, it's worth its weight in gold. But this needs to be prescribed by someone who knows what they're doing and to be appropriately supervised. Because when you get it illegally, you're never sure exactly what the strength is, how it's being produced, the toxicity, etc. It's unknown. If it's medicinal, yes.
Play it safe. Also with anxiety. Separating twins in school. Hi, Craig and Dr. Tony. My question is about identical 12-year-old twin girls. One is higher functioning than the other. Both are being homeschooled as the second one significantly underachieves at school. She also has selective mutism and dyslexia. We would like the first twin to return to school as she can cope with it. However, she can't seem to cope without her twin sister, and she suffers from extreme high anxiety, causing illness when she attends school alone. Should you separate identical twins with autism if they rely so much on each other and support each other? Or should we just carry on letting them both be home tutored together?
The twin who has more abilities, who seems more able to adapt to a school environment, may become so distressed with separation anxiety from her twin that in that level of distress, she's not going to be able to focus on the schoolwork. So she may miss out on that. I think really, as they're 12 years old, they need to make the decision themselves. And I'll go through a way that may help. And I use this in autism a lot. That is to have a large sheet of paper, and it's split into two columns. Homeschooling at the top of one and school on the other for the particular sister. And then those two columns are again divided into positives and negatives. So we will go through, for example, with the first twin, what are the positives of homeschooling, the negatives, the positives of the local school and the negatives, and then the other sister, parents, long-term and so on. So you can actually see what's occurring. We then give a numerical rating. So as a score of 0 to 10, how important each one is. I know it's a subjective one. And then add the various columns, which means that on balance, there may be a particular decision, but the two girls need to see the logic of what he's gone through, and they may give the score and appreciate the difficulties in making that decision. So, in other words, on balance, after you have seen the various options, what I'll do for those who are less able functioning, I'll actually use a mathematical activity that you have at school of scales and blocks. And I will say, now the advantage of this is ... But the advantage of this is that, okay, on balance, it tips that way, that's our decision. But to see the blocks going on so the person can, we use the phrase, I see, not I understand. So on a piece of paper, a column, work out the pros and cons, and then find out, oh, on balance, this seems to be the wise choice. What do we think? But for all people concerned.
Now we're into sensory issues. Can one person be both hypo and hypersensitive at the same time? My son is 4 years old. He has a case of regressive autism. I know he's hyposensitive to touch because he hurts himself. He does not start crying until the time he is hurt badly. But on the other hand, he wants to hear soft music and low voices to go to sleep. Is there anything like a combination of both hypo and hypersensitivities in one person?
Absolutely, yes. And this is why there needs to be a detailed assessment of his sensory profile. You can have, for example, a high pain threshold, which is what this 4-year-old may have, but a low threshold for sound. And the interesting thing is, it may fluctuate from day to day, almost like a tide is in, and also be influenced by anxiety. So when you're anxious, you're going to be more sensorily sensitive. So it is a daily fluctuation as well as a very uneven profile. Now, I strongly recommend a detailed assessment of sensory profile by an occupational therapist so that he can be assessed in terms of explaining why certain situations are aversive for him and some strategies to help. There are a variety of books on this, but occupational therapists take this as their area of expertise. They can be very good at assessing. If the mother wants a book, it's any of the books by Olga Bogdashina. In particular, I would recommend this book, Sensory Perceptual Issues in Autism and Asperger Syndrome. Different sensory experiences, different perceptual words. And at the back of this book is a very detailed assessment, and it's very well crafted and very detailed, and will provide volumes of very useful information as to why certain situations are aversive for him and other situations he doesn't pick up. So, Olga Bogdashina.
Very good. This is the category of self-esteem and self-identity. Feeling younger than your chronological age. Hi, can you speak to feeling younger? I'm 36 now, but I feel like a child, 12 or 7, sometimes even younger when I'm with others. It comes across in my naivete, my communication style, my social thinking, my humor, my inability to navigate the basics of living easily or to orient to work, money, and career. This impacts my confidence, and it seems to compound. First, is this common? And then do you have any suggestions for me?
This is very common. Indeed, when we're doing a diagnostic assessment of a child or teenager, we'll often assess their level of social maturity, emotional maturity, and intellectual maturity. And there can be huge variation. But this continues into the adult years. And so there are times when he may well be thinking and processing like a teenager rather than a mature person of 36, or emotions at times may be an explosion like a toddler or a teenager, or at other times may have an ability in advance of the chronological age. Now, it means that the person may need a psychological assessment of the approximate levels for each ability. Certainly, there are developmental levels in social and emotional that can be explored, but he may need a mentor or guide to give him information of how to get to the next developmental stage in these areas. So a lot of positive feedback, areas to work on, and projects. So he needs a mentor, usually a psychologist, in this situation. And to talk to the psychologist about what are the situations where you felt that you were naive, immature, or people looked at you in a strange way. Okay, let's go through that. At the time, as soon as you can afterwards, make notes, who was there, what happened, etc. And then go back to the psychologist and say, this was the situation. Am I reading it right? Mm-hmm. What are the things that I could do in that situation to improve my confidence and abilities? So it's taking project work on that.
Mm-hmm. Very good. This category is intimacy, dating, sex, and marriage. We have 2 questions here. Dear Dr. Tony, I'm a 36-year-old NT female, and I'm in a failing relationship with a 41-year-old male with ASD. We have attempted an intimate relationship twice in the last year. Both times, he initiated physical contact with the understanding that I only date girls that I'm serious about, and I only sleep with girls that I'm serious about, which is perfect for me. Both periods, we were together for about 3 months when he would start to get cold feet. He would push me away and he would start to withhold physical affection. Yet he's very kind, and he's terrified of hurting anyone. He describes the incongruencies of our emotional spectrum as watching the other person go deeper and deeper away. I've tried to explain to him that what he feels are his deficiencies or lack of emotions are actually the same qualities that soothe my sensitive and emotional nature, and that I am attracted to this. We have a wonderful, fun, engaging time together, and disagreements are, for the most part, intellectual sparring. I feel very strongly that this can work. How can I help him not retreat and throw something wonderful away? What a beautiful letter.
It is indeed. First of all, don't worry, don't panic. This is autism. And what it means is we've discovered that after 3 months, he's saturated, he's had enough, he needs to back off for his retreat. And so, although after 3 months, she may want to go deeper, which is the neurotypical way, his way is, I've had enough. I need to, I suppose in a way, be by himself before he can launch off socially. It's almost as though you've got a capacity for socializing, and that capacity is now full. And his main way of reducing that is by solitude. When that occurs, it is then ready and there is capacity for more engagement subsequently. Mm-hmm. So this is a natural part of autism. As far as he's concerned, speaking for him, it may well be that 3 months is his maximum of being very close to someone. And please, for this lady, not to see this as rejection. It's not rejection. It's basically saturation. Mm-hmm. And he needs to go offline for a while before he can return to her. So it may not be anything that he finds about her is repulsive or cause him to do that. He may not be heading off with someone else. It could well be that after 3 months, that's it. I need to recover from this level of intimacy. So please don't worry about it.
Dr. Tony, should she ask him about it and say, how much time do you need? Because she's probably looking for marriage.
I think she needs to talk openly with him, and he needs to be able to recognize the signals, and she may be able to say that you're starting to withdraw. Have you really reached your saturation point? Okay, now, what can I do to help you regain that energy or capacity? Are we talking several weeks or several months? And find out, still keeping in touch to a certain degree, but not perhaps at the same level of frequency and duration of social contact. He needs time alone.
Very good. Also in the same category. Hi, Dr. Tony. I'm an NT girlfriend of an undiagnosed, likely highly functioning Asperger's male. We're in our early 30s and in a serious relationship. Recently, during a fight, I asked my boyfriend, I know you don't agree with how I feel, but do you understand why I might feel that way given what just happened? He replied, yes, you would feel that way because your perception is wrong. When my boyfriend says that my perception of events is wrong, that I need to change the way I'm thinking, or I need to convince my feelings to get in line with my brain, it's maddening. I've tried to be more direct and literal, asking for exactly what I need, such as, please give me a compliment, a hug, a handhold, rather than trying to get him to understand. This helps a lot, but I sometimes forget, especially when we seem to have periods where he doesn't appear to have any Asperger symptoms at all. So my question is, can you help me understand what in the world he's talking about and how do I respond to it?
Wow. I'm going to go back to a comment. He replies, yes, you would feel that way because your perception is wrong. Really? I would say it's different, not wrong. He's assuming that I'm right, you're wrong, and you are to be corrected. That has a degree of arrogance, which is not good for a relationship. It's not wrong, it's different. There needs to be a compromise between the two of them. And he's asking her to follow and mimic or duplicate his way of thinking, which is the correct way, which is to sacrifice who she is to become a clone of him. She needs to remain exactly who she is. And I do think that a relationship counselor needs to work on that because it's not wrong, it's different. Certainly, I think the idea of asking for a compliment, hug, hand, help, he's saying that, okay, I don't need it very often, so you won't need it very often, and I won't give it to you as often as you need. Oh, dear. He does need to learn that neurotypicals are fragile flowers, and they need to be nurtured and loved and hugged and kissed every day. Otherwise, the relationship can fall apart. So if he wants the relationship, he's got to give the affection that she needs. So I think that needs to be really quite clear.
This is about ASD and intuition. I was wondering if Dr. Tony thought it was possible that a girl with ASD could start to develop intuition. I have nearly all the symptoms from his Tony Attwood Asperger's in Girls video, except that I've always been able to see the pain in others, even if they try to hide it. It attracts people to me who will drain the empathy out of me, and it will bring me their problems, which I don't mind, but it's exhausting to a point of my brain and body literally shut down and me needing sleeping for at least a whole day afterwards. I was forced to read my father's moods at a very young age to avoid his abuse. I desperately need more input as to how to work with this. How should this person care for themselves?
Okay, first of all, developing intuition. I think it was probably there right from the beginning. Certainly the circumstances at home meant that you needed to use it, but one of the characteristics of autism can be almost a sixth sense of negative mood in others. Now, I call this empathic attunement, and it's almost as though the person senses the disappointment, anger, agitation, despair in other people, and it infects them. And it seems that sometimes the social withdrawal is not purely because of social difficulties or sensory sensitivity. It's a protection mechanism because of emotional sensitivity to negativity in other people. And a survival mechanism is to stay away from certain people. Now, what's happening is that she is likely to be a very good listener in a non-judgmental way and absorb. And some people find that absolutely delightful. And I hope I can say this. They basically vomit on her in terms of the negative feelings that they have. But she can't clean herself of that. She's infected by it. And sometimes I've talked to someone with autism who's feeling down or anxious or angry. And they say, but nothing in my life has happened to create this feeling. And then I go, I've been with so-and-so. They are in that mood. You have been infected by it. And it is very difficult for you, once you have that negative mood, to get it out your system. Mm-hmm. Now, what do we do? First of all, this is a skill that is a talent. It's a very positive ability to have. But the other side of it is that you are going to become very upset. So it's really working on strategies that can affect your thinking of not my problem. They have difficulties. I have been good in listening and supporting, but that is enough. I will not let it ruin my day. Okay. It's actually what psychologists have to do, because they are listening to and absorbing quite profoundly challenging circumstances, and obviously are very supportive and empathic for the person. But we have to learn detachment, and that's what she's going to need to learn to do. It means often the person with autism who has this can be very good in the caring professions, because they really do care and pick this up. But it's having a metaphor of a suit of armor, a shield, so that you can help this person, but don't let it contaminate your own life. It is one of the aspects of autism that people need to be aware of, especially girls, when other girls are bitchy and mean.
Self-preservation. This category has two questions. I'm going to read them both at the same time. It's about PTSD and self-care. Hello, I'm 23 years old and I wasn't diagnosed with ASD until I was 19. I experienced sexual abuse at a very young age. And since then, I've experienced harassment, bullying, toxic relationships, manipulation, having my boundaries disrespected on multiple levels, difficult living situations with sensory overload, gaslighting, and great loss. I've come to realize that I have complex PTSD too, but it only shows itself when my reoccurring depression takes a break. I live in a small town, so there aren't any therapists here with knowledge about the interaction of autism and PTSD. So I'm wondering, how or where do I begin the journey of taking care of and healing myself? And the next submitted question is similar. My issue: since my recent diagnosis of AS at 55, I do finally understand the why behind the molestations, date rapes, betrayals, lost relationships, lost jobs that I experienced from age 17 to 57. But the complex PTSD is from severe neglect, abuse, and shaming from my birth home, which involved alcoholism. It has also shaped and still affected me in ways that I do not understand. My life has been unraveling for 10 years, and right now I'm just a bundle of nerves and emotion. Dr. T, how does one with ASD and PTSD take care of themselves?
This is something we're starting to explore appropriately for the first time. Autism and complex post-traumatic shock or stress disorder. Unfortunately, those with autism are vulnerable to the predators of life. They can have difficulties in their home circumstances that can be quite traumatizing. What's important is how the person reacts to and feels in relation to the trauma, not necessarily the nature of the trauma. It's how you feel. Now, one of the characteristics of autism is a great difficulty understanding why people would do things. Why would they be so horrible and mean? This is something I can't understand. What's driving that person? And often, because they can't understand why someone did this, they may ruminate on it have difficulty disclosing it. How do I express it in words? I don't understand it. Will people understand me? But it means it's a constant source of injury and pain, and it's a wound that never heals because they may ruminate on it for so long and not have closure. So sometimes we have to say, in life, what's more important, PTSD, the trauma, or the autism? Together, they're very toxic. Now, as a measure of how this is coming through as a recognition, there's a new book just out by Gordon Gates called Trauma, Stigma, and Autism, Developing Resilience and Loosening the Grip of Shame. Now, this is published by, as nearly always, Jessica Kingsley Publishers, and it's a very good book as he describes the characteristics for the first time in a book, but now research is starting to come through on what to do to help. Now, if you live in a rural area, the chances are that there won't be people locally who have the knowledge of PTSD and autism. So you may have to go to the literature, websites, and explore where you can. It is possible that if there is someone in one of the major cities who specializes in this area, to have Skype consultations with them. But otherwise, at the age of 55, you are suffering and you need closure with that, with someone who can help you. Sometimes that can be someone with autism themselves in a support group will help you. Sometimes it's somebody who's a specialist in this area. But that particular book is a starting point.
The next question is about emotional abuse. I'm a 17-year-old Asperger girl. I've recently escaped an abusive relationship with my mother, and now I live with my dad. People seem to think that I'm being dramatic and unloving, or I'm some sort of rebellious teen for not wanting to ever contact my mother again. They think I'm unforgiving, and they say that I'll regret cutting her off when I'm older. It's not true that I'm unforgiving because my dad hasn't been available for me most of my childhood, yet he's still a kind, inspiring, and loving dad to me. I've forgiven him for not being there for me when I was younger, but I understand now because I know the situation between him and my mother. My mother is the opposite, and yet she's the one people try to make up excuses for, like saying she has menopause. Well, menopause or not, she has been a controlling creep ever since she dumped her boyfriend from mine, who obviously rejected her. She's picked my locked door, she's told me to go to the shower while she is in my room, and she's physically assaulted me. She's verbally berated me for little things, and she's tried to prohibit me from pursuing my special interests or after-school coping routines. Am I justified to never talk to my mother again? Thank you for reading this.
From what you've described, absolutely, you're doing the right thing. She's going to contaminate you. She's going to be quite toxic. She's going to be very confusing. And from what you've described there, I think she's not the sort of person that you want to be associated with. You need to move on and have closure. So make it a part of your past, not current or future.
Mm-hmm. I have two questions here about ASD parenting skills. They're related. My hubby is an incredible man. He's a loving father and a husband. He was diagnosed with Asperger's about 18 months ago. He's never learned healthy coping skills for his stress. So we originally started with counseling because he had begun manhandling our toddler. He understands that he should not do this, that it's not okay, and mostly it isn't an issue. But until it's never an issue, I never know if I can go anywhere since we have 3 small boys, ages 5, 2, and 1. He also seems determined that spanking is not the same as manhandling, and he thinks it's okay. He uses fear, such as yelling and threats, to get our children, mostly our oldest, who also has Asperger's, to obey him. His other go-to is to lock our oldest outside the house. He's a loving man, and he wants to be a good father, and he's upset himself that these seem to be his only reactions to our children. We've been in counseling over 2 years, but either he can't see it this way, or he can't get himself to act and find the resources or the help that he needs to change. I'm so tired of worrying that he'll do something he'll regret and that our children are only learning to scream and hit when angry or overwhelmed. Let's take that one and then I'll read the next one.
Okay, that's a problem. The counselling will have helped in a way and may have explained to the husband more appropriate strategies. Often in autism, you have a one-track mind, and this is the way you do it, and can be encouraged to try different ways. Now, when he's calm in a counselling session, he can probably logically, calmly work out, this is what I do, and will promise to do that. However, it's a little bit like having a filing cabinet, which represents the brain, and you learn skills. Each one is a file in the filing cabinet. And when you're relaxed, you will open the filing cabinet, you will pull out the file, I will stay calm, I will reinforce good behavior, I will try not to focus, etc. And yes, it's in the brain. But the moment he gets frustrated or agitated, the filing cabinet is locked and he goes back to his original default position and then may feel guilty over that. So in that situation, basically, when he's upset, he needs to leave rather than push the son outside. It's basically, I'm going. Now that means go to another room, go out into the garden, go onto the computer. In other words, when he's getting upset, he's not going to make wise decisions. He needs to get out of the situation and leave his wife to deal with it. Okay? So for his sake, he needs, perhaps with a prompt from his wife or knowing himself, I'm getting irritated, I want to manhandle, threaten, smack, or whatever it is that particular time. As soon as that thought comes, that's the trigger to go. Because if you carry on, you'll do something you'll regret, and that's not appropriate. And leave his wife to deal with the situation. So he needs an exit strategy when he gets upset.
This next question again is similar. How can an Aspie husband learn to deal with his autistic child? The child makes a lot of screeches and noise and is very sensory seeking, especially proprioceptive. Our daughter is always driving him crazy and he pushed her away. I know it's damaging to the relationship.
Oh, that's a tricky one. It means that the sensory component is going to be unbearable for the dad, and he wants to stop it and pushes her away. She won't understand why he's actually doing it. Now, I don't know how old the child is, but from the description of child, I would assume elementary school age. And when she makes her screeching and noises and sensory seeking, that's just the way she is. If anything, it would be trying to encourage the Aspie husband either to endure it because of the sake of the relationship, or if it starts to occur, he leaves the room. Again, it's a very similar approach. If it reaches a point where the person with autism may do something that would be inappropriate, they need to leave.
Sound advice.
Yeah.
This one is called a Curious Tic. I'd like to ask a question about a tic that my daughter has. She's 8 years old and we live in Japan. Last year in first grade, she developed a tic where she said her body would stop. She would be walking, then just stop completely for a few moments. Or when drawing a picture or eating dinner, just freeze for a few moments. She is totally cognizant of it and doesn't like it, but can't seem to do anything to prevent it. The doctor that we see suggested that it was stress from school, thinking that she just burned herself out and she needed time to recharge. After a couple months of rest, the tic had gone. However, after starting second grade, the tic returned. This time, I don't think it's as bad, but along with the body stop, she now repeatedly asks, "Is this mine?" And when eating something, for every mouthful of food before consuming, she asks, "Is this mine?" Also when drawing, each time she picks up a pen and asks, "Is this mine?" Sometimes she even asks, "Is this voice mine?" before beginning a conversation or even partway through a conversation. Do you know what causes this? Should we just ride these tics out when they happen? At the moment, we just answer her, "Yes, it's yours," without making a big deal out of it.
First of all, I think you're absolutely right. to answer, yes, it's yours, without making a big deal of it. Otherwise, it becomes a big deal. But this is unusual. She has tics, yes, and almost is developing cues for a sequence. Whenever she sees something to eat and so on, she has a response that she has to make of saying a certain phrase. For me, this is indicative of high levels of anxiety. Now, the stress may be contributing to that anxiety, but I would recommend in Japan seeing somebody who may be able to assess anxiety levels and see if this is a factor. It may well be stress in relation to the school setting. It may be that she's freezing, but in a way, it's an unusual tic, and usually there'll be a lot of other tics other than that. So the pattern is unusual. Now, freezing can be associated with a range of things, but I think at 8 years old, the most likely one is that it could be a momentary freezing as a stress-related problem. We don't know what she was thinking at the time, etc. So stress is most likely. I think if there's a driving emotion underneath, it's probably anxiety because of the compulsive sequences she has to go through. So maybe at 8 years old, she's developing signs of an anxiety disorder, and that really requires an assessment.
Next is faking it and masks. Wearing masks is exhausting. I've started to completely avoid going out in public because I feel this pressure to engage. Sometimes people think I'm the life of the party. I hate it. My mother was always disappointed in me. She wanted me to be someone else. She told me I had no personality. So I wear the biggest masks for her, mimicking my brother and my best friend. People don't believe me. My mother doesn't believe me because I talk to people so well in public. It's gotten to where I want to drink all the time in case somebody pops over unexpectedly. I don't like unexpected visits. Now I just smoke cigarettes and drink. Smoking allows you to get away from people, and drinking dulls your senses, so the overwhelming world isn't buzzing loudly in your brain, all while you're expected to smile and engage. As a child, I ran away and hid from overwhelming things, but I was yelled at and spanked. My first mask was silence, selective mutism in school. My second was studious shyness. My third was snarky, yet shy, imitating my brother. My fourth is a drunken, chain-smoking, yet disgustingly nice housewife who is fun when she drinks. That one is the worst because the mask is actually harder to keep up when drunk, but at the time it feels better.
Oh dear, I do really feel for this person. You need to be what I call a first-rate Aspie, not a second-rate neurotypical. Maya Tode, who I mentioned earlier with energy accounting, has used the phrase that this lady every day should be given an Oscar for her performance as neurotypical. And she's done it very well, that it's successful. But psychologically, it is not a recommended strategy. Now, the alcohol will help relax her, and she needs alternative ways of relaxing. It also means that she's reached a tipping point in her life where the amount of social expectations on her are actually beyond the level she can cope with when she acts. So I really would say to try and discover who she is and then explain herself. That is, find out who the real self is, and aspects that may be confusing or abrasive to others, and then learn a way of explaining it. I'm the sort of person, is the phrase we would use. I'm the sort of person who likes socializing for 10 minutes, then I'm exhausted, I need to take a break. Or I'm the sort of person who really enjoys solitude, I'm going to need to take a break at this moment. So she needs to be able to explain herself to other people. So rather than become a fake person, the person they want, she can be true to herself, but explain what it is about her that's different, so that it doesn't become a source of, I suppose, criticism from other people. Now, she has some amazing phrases here. Her mask, my first mask was silence, selective mutism in school. That's so eloquent. My second was studious shyness. My third, snarky yet shy. My brother. The fourth is a drunken, chain-smoking, etc. Well, stop acting. Be true to yourself. But you need to discover who you are with someone you trust. Again, it may be a psychologist or counselor. And find out what it is that you do that drains you so much, and do less of it, because the outcome is going to be lethal in terms of depression and suicidal ideation, or drinking yourself into an early grave. It is not a good mask. Be true to the real self. Please, basically, stop it. Be real.
Wow. This also came in. It's about audiobooks. Dr. Tony, do you have audiobook versions of your book? Been there, done that, try this. My ADD, my ADHD, dyslexia, and CAPD make it difficult for me to sit and concentrate and read without moving around. I bought a hard copy and repeatedly failed to read it. I prefer audiobooks as I like to do other tasks while I listen, and I have a stronger ability to remember what I hear and focus on.
What a timely question. Interestingly, a few weeks ago, I was in London, and Jessica Kingsley Publishers asked me to go to a recording studio and record for an audio book my opening chapter of the book, The Complete Guide to Asperger Syndrome. And the rest will be actually spoken by a professional actor who will provide the information on an audio book. Now, as far as I know, this is my first audio book, The Complete Guide. And I hope that been there, done that, try this is perhaps the next cab off the rank. So in other words, yes, it's on the way. Now, I had great difficulty making sure that there were no mistakes. And the engineer said, no, Tony, say that sentence again. You mispronounced a word, or you missed a word, and so on. And I was actually describing the diagnostic criteria. And it is very difficult to make the diagnostic criteria sound interesting. But anyway, the first chapter is my actual voice, then it's an actor's voice. Now, it should come out later this year, The Complete Guide, the audiobook version.
I don't know how you find the time, but I'm very glad that you do.
Thank
All right,
you.
this last was a comment that came in, and it's called, Why Get a Diagnosis? In the 90s, I was diagnosed as having ADHD and was most likely dyslexic. Those diagnoses changed my life. It helped me to forgive myself. It helped me to understand the way that I was couldn't be helped and wasn't my fault. You see, I've always felt like something was wrong with me. I have always felt out of place in most situations, and I suspect that I am also on the autism spectrum. Finding out that there might be an explanation for many of my lacks would give me further insight to not condemn myself so heavily. Also, to possibly relieve some of the depression that I have, as well as the anxiety that I face each day. So, I really understand why so many want to have a diagnosis. It offers them forgiveness.
That is so true. Unfortunately, a characteristic of autism can be to be very self-critical. And sometimes that criticism didn't necessarily come from parents or teachers or peers. It was self-imposed. I'm not good enough. There's a fear of being judged. And so it gives you an opportunity to realize I'm different. I'm not defective. This is the way I am. And I really like that the suggestion of the author of this comment offers them forgiveness for themselves. They need it. They need it from themselves. Otherwise, they have criticized and been so judgmental in a way that is cruel by someone who's actually very kind and has not been kind to themselves. That's why it's needed.
For those of you watching that are interested in being tested for autism, I would encourage you to contact your local autism association for a list of autism professionals near you. Dr. Tony, we're at the end of our list. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you so much for your helpful answers.
Thank you, Craig. They are some fascinating, deep and meaningful questions. People have been able to expose their inner experiences. So I'm honored that they are prepared to do that, and I hope that they have some explanations and strategies. A delight, as always, to do Ask Dr. Tony with you, Craig. I think what we're doing here is so valuable. Let's keep doing it.
I love hearing from you folks. If you find these helpful, please tell us what you have more of an interest in learning about. Submit those questions at autismhangout.com. So that's it for today. Thank you, Dr. Tony, and thank you for watching, folks. We'll see you again next time for another Ask Dr. Tony episode.